So basically, what I was thinking of was, oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
So I went to try out the new Synchro Monsters, Sun and Moon, on stream the other day. And well, let's just say I think I'm going to wait until the new character comes out before I take another crack at trying to make this shit work. But because of this failure, I'm kinda left in an awkward spot where I still want to make a video, but no longer have any content to make it on. So I thought, why not do a follow-up video to a video I did back in August to try and appease the free-to-play portion of my audience. Now just like the previous video, this one will be very different from my standard videos, as it's basically just going to be me talking over a bunch of deck lists with absolutely zero gameplay. So if you're here for the gameplay, I suggest you go check out one of my other fantastic videos. So this list will follow the same general guidelines as the previous. All cards must be attainable without spending a single cent, which means no structure decks. Even if structure decks, such as the Ancient Gear one, are a relatively cheap way to play Duel Links, it does mean you have to spend real money, and I know most of you are here for the freebies. The majority of the cards all must come from the same box. Now I do break this guideline a little bit, especially with the first deck, but in general, this rule is needed, as it makes it a lot easier to actually complete a deck if you're only opening one box. Each deck has to be at least somewhat competitive. Now when I say this, I don't mean top tier, tournament winning stuff. I mean decks that can at least compete on the ladder and isn't just written off as a meme. Something that can reach King of Games, even if it does have to wait till the end of the month to do so, when the ladder is a little bit easier. And finally, because I know there will be a few comments asking why something like Fur Hire or Despot isn't on the list, I will not be including any deck lists I used in the previous budget video, as I don't want to overlap, so you guys can check out that video as well if you want another whole bunch of free-to-play decks to try out. Okay, let's get into it. By the way, I will be showing these decks in order of how strong I think they are currently. Coming in at number 5, we have one of the most annoying decks ever released into Duel Links, Yubel. Yubel has always been a deck that people have debated about how strong it actually is, as in some metas this deck can be simply a godsend, as it requires your opponent to have an out, and if they don't have the out, they simply lose as soon as Yubel is summoned. For those of you unfamiliar with the deck, it's based around the 3 forms of Yubel. The entire aim of the deck is to destroy Yubel in hand, to special summon Terror Incarnate from the deck, which is a monster that cannot be destroyed by battle, cannot take battle damage, and in fact inflicts battle damage when attacked, and will continuously nuke the field at the end of each of your turns, destroying all monsters other than itself. And on top of that, when removed, we'll also summon its 3rd form, which is once again a monster that cannot be destroyed by battle, and when it battles, it will destroy the monster it fights, dealing damage to your opponent equal to its attack. Now there are a couple of ways to run Yubel, such as the more stally mill version using Warm Worm, but the most common one is definitely by using Phoenix, which is where this deck breaks the all cards in the same box rule. This deck is made out of 2 boxes, Absolute Inferno and Dawn of Destiny, with every single card on the list being below R rarity, outside of the 2 Phoenixes, and the completely free to play, farmable Yubel. Despite this deck still needing 2 ultra rares from boxes to run, I would still consider it extremely free to play, as basically, once you've gone a 1 from the box, the likelihood of you having the rest of the cards needed for the deck from that box already is pretty high, meaning you can straight away start opening packs from the other. And of course, there is no extra deck, so you can save a bunch there. Coming in at number 4, we have a deck list I have already showcased on this channel recently, Aquatrice. I just had to include this deck on the list, as it sits just behind Guardians as being the most free to play competitive deck from a box in the entire game, with every single card in the deck being R rarity or less outside of the Wetlands, which just takes a rank ticket, and Double Cyclone, which can be obtained in 3 different places, so most people have at least 1 copy anyway. But if you don't, you can always replace it with Parallel Twister or Storm if you're desperate. The list is extremely easy to play, as each of your monsters has a straightforward 1 line of text for you to read, and despite all the card text that the continuous spells have, they are actually pretty easy to decipher, and the wall of text only act as a way for you to bring in unsuspecting illiterate players who cannot be bothered to check your back row. The entire aim of the deck is to spam the board with a bunch of Aqua-type monsters, who will then buff to pretty extreme lengths via Wetlands and Aquarium Set, and once put into combat, will have their already pretty decent stats doubled thanks to Lighting, bringing their attack to over 5k at some points. The core of the deck can all be obtained through Gaia Genesis, and does not contain a single extra deck card, once again cutting the cost significantly. I won't say anything else on the list, as I literally just made an entire video on this deck, which you guys can feel free to check out if you're interested and want to see some gameplay or just learn more about it. At number 3 we have yet again another deck I recently made a video on, and my favourite art type in the game, Cyber Angels. This deck has a ton of history behind it, as it was once the king of the game, Tier 0, an unstoppable force of pure consistency that took Konami 3 bans to finally snuff out. But thanks to Konami finally coming to their senses and deciding to release a card that was unjustly banned, which had absolutely nothing to do with a certain YouTuber making multiple videos on the matter, and starting a pretty popular hashtag that was spammed whenever the art type was brought up, Cyber Angels gained back a little bit of life. But up until a couple of weeks ago, they were always considered stuck behind a paywall, despite nearly all the cards coming from either events, level up, or drop rewards, due to the deck feeling basically unplayable without Senju or Geese Chain, which are both ultra rare. But thanks to one of the recent events, we now have a replacement, releasing this list from its pay-to-win prison, making the entire deck obtainable outside of boxes except for one card, which is only a rare and can be obtained in 2 different places. For those unfamiliar with the deck aims to basically summon really big ritual boss monsters that all use the most powerful kind of removal in the game, outside of maybe tributing. Non-targeting, send removal, to both remove frontline and backline, with all of your boss monsters protected from destruction effects thanks to Machine Angel Ritual. Once again, the deck requires no extra deck, but unfortunately for a lot of you, if you simply were not around for the events or were too lazy to farm the cards, this list will simply be unavailable to you, and the only real replacements will go back to being very expensive ultra rares. If you want to see gameplay on this archetype or just want to know more, feel free to check out my latest video on this deck list, as it's basically exactly the same with one minor change, which was because I wanted to test out a new card. I've also made several other videos on Cyber Angels if you want to learn more about them. At number 2 we have by far the cheapest competitive deck ever released into Duel Links. That can be obtained from boxes. Flower Cardians. This deck is an interesting one, as its playstyle is essentially an OTK deck, but it's rather different, often being compared to playing a game of solitaire. Nearly every game played with this deck isn't you versus an opponent, it's simply you versus your own deck and the timer, as if you don't brick or run out of time, you basically win 70% of the time. But the fact this deck does brick a lot is what keeps this deck from ever seeing any kind of real tournament play, despite the list being honestly quite strong. Well, that and the deck doesn't actually have a turn 1 play at all, meaning you're left hiding behind Grit, in hopes of not getting domed. For those of you who have never actually seen this deck play before, basically it all starts with you trying to draw your only possible normal summon in the deck, Pine, which is roughly a 60% chance, which can be increased by starting flower stacking, which you run 3 of. From there, the deck will basically become a fight against the clock, as you will try to draw your entire deck, which will simultaneously, slowly, destroy every single card your opponent controls, along with their hopes and dreams, until you have 4k worth of monster stats on the board to beat your opponent to death. The entire deck can be obtained through the box Valhalla Calling, and does not contain a single card over R rarity, including the extra deck. This deck isn't necessarily hard to play, but it will take some time to get used to, so I highly recommend you play against the AI a few times first, unless you want to learn whilst playing against the clog, which really isn't a good idea. I do have an old video on this deck, and luckily enough the deck has not received any more support or change, meaning the list in that video is still exactly the same, so if you want to learn how to play the deck, that would be a good starting point. And finally, the strongest deck on this list, and another time consumer, Metaphys. This deck is honestly really strong, appearing multiple times on the Duel Links meta tier list this year, and the free-to-play version of this list don't differ that much at all from the pay-to-win variants outside of Gold Sarcophagus, due to the only ultra rare you actually need, being searchable. The deck's playstyle revolves entirely around banishing monsters from your hand and deck, which will in turn activate all of their abilities, allowing you to search for just about anything, including the single ultra rare dimension that you run. Which is honestly pretty nuts, as it will keep banishing your opponent's stuff every time you banish a Metaphys monster, which this deck does continuously. The main card of the deck is Daedalus, which basically carries with it an AoE nuke to any special summon monster your opponent has, which is a non-target banish removal source. The main weakness of this deck is that it doesn't really have a turn 1 play, as it's completely reactive. Its monsters by themselves aren't really all that tough, and are kind of vulnerable, meaning it really wants your opponent to play stuff for you to remove before it tries to pop off itself. This weakness is why, just like Cardians, we run Grit. But unlike Cardians, this deck can afford to run back row, and of course the new flavour of the month card, Kiteroid, to prevent yourself from being deleted. This list is probably the most expensive out of the 5 I've shown, maybe tying with Yubel, due to it needing 2 SR cards and an ultra rare, but it's all from the same box, Blazing Rose, with the rest of the list being below R rarity, and once again does not require an extra deck. Alright guys, that's basically it for the video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I would absolutely love to hear feedback on this video as to whether or not you kind of enjoyed this style of commentary. I've tried it out a few times on this channel now, and it's always been pretty well received, and it's been a pretty warm response, so I hope to be able to continue doing videos like this for filler content when there really isn't all that much for me to make videos on. All decks mentioned will be linked in the description down below if you want to go try them out, along with links to my Discord, my Patreon and my Twitch for you guys to go check out and support me further. Other than that, that's basically it from me. Thank you all for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Make sure to like this video on the way out.
Hey, big brother, can I watch SpongeBob?
Shut up, Mokuba. I'm busy flagging YouTube videos to compensate for the fact that I have an extremely small penis.
Oh.